Hi, and welcome to this lecture where we'll be talking about creating requests with Postman. So you probably already played a bit with Postman and have a general idea on how you can submit a request, but I wanted in this lecture to point out a few features that Postman has to offer so that you can take 100% advantage of all the functionality that is out there. Generally speaking, an HTTP request is made out of 4 parts. So if you have Postman already open, you will see that the upper part is separated from the response part. And everything that you can see in the upper part is relative to sending that request. So an HTTP request has 4 parts, and these are the request method, which Postman offers you a list of different request methods. The URL where this request should go, and like in a browser, Postman offers you the possibility of entering that. You can submit headers with that request, and for some request types you can submit a body as well. So let's take them one by one. Starting with a request method, this is pretty straightforward and there's very little you can do with it rather than select from a list of available options the request method that you are going to use. Most likely you will only need get, post, put, patch, and delete. The other ones, if you probably need them, you are already at another level, so I don't want to get into the purpose of them. But anytime you would need something like that, you will find it in this list. Moving on to the probably one of the most important aspects is the request URL. To better show you how it works, I will go to request bin and create another bin. So I invite you to try it up yourself. Go to this address, request bin, and create another request bin that you will use. And you will see the URL right here above. This is just a simple step that allows you to see what you're actually sending to a server without having any complicated setup. I'm going to paste this address here, and without any specific information, I'll just hit the send button. Now if I go back to request bin and reload this page, I will see that I got a request. The request method was get, and I haven't actually sent anything else. So let's try to play a bit and send some additional parameters. The other thing that I need to add after this, I'm gonna put a question mark. Let's start with something very simple like bar. Set it again. And you can actually see here that what I submitted is available directly in this request bin. So I sent additional a query string, so 2 additional parameters, where foo is a key, bar is the value. So nothing special so far. And as you probably remember from the introduction lecture, if you click here the params button, you can easily change the value of bar or even add additional keys. For example, like foo2, bar2. And Postman will handle this for you and will allow you to make any change. Now, there's one important thing to notice. Everything that Postman is sending by default is not URL encoded. So if I, for example, send here bar, we'll see that I have a white space. The white space here is not encoded. This is the way it will land on the request bin as well. It will not be encoded. You will see here, you can still see a space. Anyway, if you need encoding, doesn't matter if you're here or if you're in the address bar, you just select the text and right click, you can encode that text. So you will see here that the white space was URL encoded. Additionally, you can activate or deactivate any values that you sent with the params. You can add a description, or if you're not working all the time with it, you can just close it and you'll be able to see that here. Another feature that Postman offers you is that once you typed an address, you will get an autocomplete, the address bar, similar to a browser. So if I'm searching for request bin, I will have here this information that I needed. Postman additionally supports path variables. So imagine that you have an API. Let's take and let's say you have a list of users and you're getting user with ID 5. See a list of contracts from that user. Select the second contract, for example. That will work without any problems, but Postman offers you the possibility of making more sense of what exactly you're typing here. So I'm going to replace 5 with user ID. I'm going to replace 2 with contract ID. Notice I added a column before user ID and before contract ID. Now if I click the params, we'll actually get user ID and contract ID like parameters as well. And I can do the same thing, like putting here user ID 5, contract ID 1. And Postman would actually submit that in that form. And you will see later that this is very important, not just for editing purposes, but later we'll be able to make these values actually dynamically, to replace them with variables that change depending on the context or depending what you're doing, so that you don't have to change them manually, but at the same time make sense of what the API is offering. This is pretty much everything you should know about how to change something in a request URL. Let's move to more advanced things like the headers. Headers are part of the request as well, and they have the format of key value. And at the key, there are already predefined headers that you can use, but you can very easily define your own headers if you need to. So every time you'll insert something, you will get a list of possibilities. So let's imagine that we're gonna send a header which start with do not track, and let's put here a value 1. And this is a header that will be received by the server. So just to show you that, I'll copy again the request bin URL, paste it here, and our expectation is that this header will be shown. Now if I refresh the page and look at the headers that were received, I will see in this list of headers that I actually have a do not track header with the value that I selected. So not only that I can use pre-selected headers, but I can use my headers. So this is just my and just as with parameters, I can add descriptions if I want to. That header was sent and received as well. You'll see it here, my own header. And this is how you send headers. Now, you'll notice here in this list, there are multiple headers. Some of these headers are being automatically sent by Postman. For example, this user agent. But some headers are added by request bin when receiving the request. So you don't have to wonder what are all these headers with. They are not all sent by you, but some of them are. We'll come back to headers in a bit because they are related to what kind of contents we are sending. So if, for example, I'm sending a post request and switch to body, which is actually the body of the request, so the data that I'm sending with that request, and the body will only be visible for requests other than get. So for example, put will have a body, patch will have a body. So in this case, I'll be selecting post. And under body, you will see here different options that you can select. Now, This might be a bit scary at the beginning, so I will try to get each and every one of them so you can understand what exactly is happening here and why you might need some of them. Now, form data and XWW form URL encoded are pretty similar. So older forms where you just have a normal HTML form which submits some data to the server. Well, this is exactly what form data and XWW form URL encoder is trying to emulate. You actually have some fields that the user completes. You can submit that value to your server. And just to exemplify this, let's put it first name. So this is, imagine you have a registration form or something like that that you want to test. And with form data, you can do that. It doesn't really have to do a lot with RESTful APIs, but Postman supports that as well if you need it. Sending the request and showing request bin to show what showed up. We'll see that last name and first name will shown as post parameters. We'll see here that this is a post request. It's additionally important to notice that Postman added a few headers as well. So if you're looking at content type, this is something that Postman automatically detected and added this information to the request. So this is something you do not see directly, but this is done by Postman. So it's quite important to see here the role body that was received by the server, and this is actually the information that the server received. And after that, it parsed that information, and you will be able in your application to use this post parameter. In a similar fashion works XWW form URL encoded. The key difference is it will URL encode the values that you submit. So let's imagine that you're sending here. And inspecting this request, you actually see that the information that you submitted was URL encoded. You'll notice here that apart from these two headers that I already have here, in this case, Postman automatically added this content type when submitting the request. These two are very similar and really depends on your needs to select the proper one. I invite you to experiment with both of them to get a better understanding on how they work and how the differences are, especially for your own server. But in essence, they are very, very similar. Now, if you're moving more to RESTful APIs, most RESTful APIs actually expect that you send them a body with a certain format. Most commonly that will be simply JSON, but they may just accept anything else like a simple text or XML or whatever they are expecting. So I will show you how you can just enter JSON here, the valid JSON string. And first, this is represented as text. But if I'm sending JSON, I can just select here the encoding of JSON application JSON. And if I'm looking at a header, Postman automatically updated this information. Quickly jumping back to headers, it's good that every time you submit a request to have a look at what headers you're submitting to make sure that they're still valid for what you're doing. Just as with parameters, you can just click on this button to have the raw version. Or if you're using some custom headers all the time and you don't want to type them every time you're using that, you can use here some presets and you can define your own headers. So let's imagine that you would like to use my custom header. Let's type in. This is something that will be all the time available for you. You can just select here from the list my custom header, and that will be automatically added to your request in case you need that. I wanted to submit a raw request. I have already written a valid JSON, selected application JSON as encoding that was automatically updated by Postman in the headers part. If I now submit a request, I will see that this is the raw body and it's actually the responsibility of the server to interpret it. know what it is, but based on the content type, I already told that server, hey, I'm sending you JSON. You should parse it. You should try to parse it as JSON and not as anything else. The second thing that you will notice is that your custom header was sent as well, and you will be able to inspect it. I'm using request bin at this point because it's much easier to test different functionality of Postman, but this is just for testing purposes, and it's much easier than having your own server where you have all this debug information there. But after you played around with the request bin, I invite you to try it with your own application to see how it performs with Postman and if you get the responses that you expect. Last but not least, binary. Binary is designed for information that you want to send to your API or to your server, but you cannot directly enter using Postman. So for example, if you want to send an entire image, and you'll actually have to open that image, get its contents, put it here at a raw part, paste it, and then submit the request. Because it's more complicated to do that, you can just select a file and send it to your server. So just to demonstrate that, I will select an image and I will submit it. Now you'll see that the body that was received is actually the contents of that image. Additionally, if you're working with forms, I just wanted to show you that at this part you can add a file as well, and you just type another key, and instead of text, which is kind of hidden here, you just select add file, and instead of value you'll be able to add that value as well. This is in case you're working with form uploads or something like that. It's a bit hidden, but can be very useful for you. And of course, Postman will take care of adding the proper headers to your request so that your server can properly interpret the information. Additionally, if you have a request which is in JSON format or in XML or anything else, type it here. We'll see that probably not so nicely formatted. So with Control or Command, if you're on Mac, Command B, Control B, you will be able to prettify this information here. So it will be shown in a very nice format. As you have a long JSON string with all this information, just pressing Command or Control B will make everything beautiful. That works for JSON and XML as well. It's just a small tip in case you're doing it often. What is definitely not working is if your server is expecting JSON, you cannot just use form data to create JSON. Form data will give you something else. So this is why you need to stick with the raw format and make all your editing here. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. I invite you to experiment more with request bin to try different functionalities in Postman, see how they work. And just let me know if you have any other questions. See you at the next lecture.